Hello. In the last video, we discussed about how to upload a file in S3 using Node.js. And in today's video, we'll discuss about how we can download a file from S3. We'll also see how we can list all the files from the S3. I'll also link down the link of the last video in the description. So let's get started. So first what we'll do, we'll create a service which can list down all the files in our bucket. So I'll create a function get bucket list from S3. I'll pass bucket name with which I'll get all the data. I'll add it in the exports so that I can consume it in my controller. I'll create an S3 instance. So I've already created a function how to create a S3 instance in the last video, so I'll just call that. Now we'll fill few of the params which we will pass to get the data. So first we want the bucket name, and then we want the max keys. Max keys indicates like how many objects, the list of the objects how we want from the S3 bucket. So I'll create a constant bucket data where I will get the list of the objects, and I'll call S3 list objects. Inside this I will pass my params, and let's seal it with the promise. Now whatever the data I got back, let's return it so that we can consume it in our service. So since it's an object what we get, so I'll return the data. If the data is not present, I'll return the empty object, so that my caller function should get an object all the time. Now let's go to the controller. Let's create a controller for this same thing. Let's hide whatever is not required. So what I'll do, I'll create a new function which will get the S3 data. So I'll call it get S3 request response, and I'll add it in the export so that I can consume it in my routes. So I'll create a bucket data, and then I'll call the get bucket list from S3, the same what we created in our services, and I'll pass the bucket name. And let's await in front of it, and then let's whatever the data we get, let's send back that data. I'll also enclose my function into a try catch block, so that in case if there is any error, I'll just respond back with an empty array. Also I'll call that method in my imports. Also, since the data what we get is an object, and then we have to return an array, just an array, so what I'll do, I'll extract the contents, and then I'll also map only those things which are necessary. So what I'll do is all we want is key, and when with the size of the object, and then when it got last modified. So those are the three things which I'll just map and will pass, and that's the data which I will pass back to my as a response of my API which I will create. And also the size is in KB, so let's convert the size is in bytes, so let's convert it to KB, and then postfix a KB to it so that we can show it directly in our UI. Once that is done, let's create a route for it where we will consume the controller what we just created. So I'll call it as all files, since it's the get, so get all files, and S3 get is something which I will call. Once this is done, what we can do, let's start our server, and then we will try to hit this API directly from our web browser and see what data we are getting back. So this is the path, and I'll just put this because it's running on 8080. So this is the data what we get back. If we check our S3, that's the data what we have. Fine. So now what we'll do, we'll create a UI for this, where on load we will just load all of this data and show it in our UI. So I'll put an onload in the body, and then create a function of onload. So I'll create a function load data, and inside it I'll call get bucket object list, which will call this API and then will render the data in the HTML. So in the get bucket object list, what I'll do, I'll create an XHR request. I'll create a new XML HTTP request, and on ready state we'll pass a function where like whenever there is any state update, this function will be triggered. So we'll particularly look for the done state of the XHR. We'll put some timeout, and then we'll open the request, and then we'll send the make the call. So it's a get call, and then all files is the route what we have, right? So yeah, so inside we'll check for if the XHR ready state is done. So once it's done, which means that we can access the data from the XHR status. I mean, not the status, we can get the response text, which will be in a string format. Also, what we can do is I can make this as a generic function, because next time I'll be calling this again to get the path of the URL. So I'll just convert it into the get data, and I'll just call a get data with the URL in it. And also, like, I need to pass a callback, so that once the data is ready, I'll get the data back. So I'll just call the callback with the response text and then the data. So initially I'll just console log and see whether like I'm getting the data or not. So now let's try to reload our page with the 8080. Let's open the console and see what data we are getting back. So yes, on refresh I'm getting the same data, so which means from the UI our call is working. So now the next thing what we'll do is we will pass this data, and then we'll put it in our UI. So for that, what we'll do, I'll create some structure in my HTML. I'll create some div. First let me close all the unnecessary functions. So yeah, I'll create a div. I'll attach an ID to it. Maybe like I'll use it to give some CSS or to access it. Let's create a heading with the bucket data, so that we know, okay, this is the bucket data. Although it's not a UI tutorial, so I'll keep it as basic as I can. So I'll attach an ID to the new div. Inside it, bucket data list, I'll be accessing this div with the get document by ID, and then I'll be pushing all the data inside it. So yep, so I'll create a object list where I'll just map the data in the form of I'll create another div inside it, and then it's an array of divs where inside I'll be having my file name, file size, and then the last updated status, like the time of when was the file last modified. Fine, that's it. And also yeah, so once everything is in my object list, what I'll do, I'll just get element by the ID of the bucket data list, the ID what I created, and then in the inner HTML I'll just pass this object list. Also, yes, since the data is a string, so what I have to do, I have to parse the data. So I'll json.parse and then the data. Although like it should be in a try catch block, but then just for this demo purpose, I'm not wrapping everything inside. Fine. So yes, as we can see, the bucket data is now there, and it is being loaded in the UI. So the next thing what I can do, I can like wrap it in, I can add some styles to it which I've already created. So I'll just copy paste, I'll put it in a card format, and I'll make it a clickable. So my idea is like on load, we'll load all the data, and then when you click on the particular data, that particular data will be the file will be downloaded. So I'll add some of the CSS, some extra CSS there, so that it looks like a card, but yeah, we'll keep it very simple here this time. So if I refresh, okay, it looks like a card, and then the purpose is when we click, the data file should be downloaded. Right, so let's come back to our S3 service. Let's collapse whatever is not required now, and now we'll create another function to get the pre-signed URL. We are not going to download the file as it is, because we can like restrict the access to the bucket. So what we'll do, we'll get a pre-signed URL. So what a signed URL do is it will sign the URL whatever that file is present. It will create a URL with some credentials, and then that will be downloaded. So we'll pass some parameters to get the signed URL. Same, we'll create an S3 object, parameters. In the parameters we need only two things: bucket name and then the key. And there is one optional thing as well, which is the expiry time, which we let. So what I'll do is I'll just call the get signed URL of S3. I'll specify as a get object, and then I'll pass the params. There is no need to add a promise here because it is already a synchronous call. So I'll wait for it, and then yeah, I'll add an expiry time of 60 seconds maybe, and then whatever the pre-signed URL I got, I'll just return it back. Now that's the same function which I will consume in my new controller. So I'll go to controllers. I'll create a new controller. First I'll like collapse whatever is not required. So I'll create a new controller to get the pre-signed URL. So get signed URL, request response, and this time I have to get the key name from my params. So I'll get the key from my request params. I'll also import that pre-signed URL from my services. All I'll do is I'll just call that function with the bucket name and then the key name, and then whatever data I'm getting, I'll just send it back. Right, I'll also console log, try to see like whatever key is coming in, and also yeah, it's the request params, not the body.params, it's just request.params. So once this is done, I'll create a route in my routers. So it's again a get app.get get objects URL. I'll name it, and then I'll pass the key after it, and then I'll call the controller get signed URL. So once this is done, let's try to call this URL from our web browser and see if this is working. So let's start our service again. Let's open the browser, new tab, and then I'll paste the link. And yes, so we are getting a URL. If you see, it is already signed. It has a AWS access key ID attached to it, so which is valid only for 60 seconds. And when I click open that link, the file is downloaded. So that's the file which was present in our S3 bucket. So next what we will do, we will try to consume the same API from our UI. So what I'll do, in the div I'll attach a on click, and then whatever on click I'll pass the item, and then I'll create a function download file. So on click, the download file will be called with the item, and then in the items I will or let's not pass the item because I don't think we'll be able to pass. So what we can do, we can pass the index itself, and to pass the index we have to also keep a note of what is the list we have. So whenever we are like getting all the data, I'll just save the list of all the data, and not here, after once we parse it, otherwise it will be a string, and I'll pass the index to my download files. So I'll extract the file name first from the list of the index. So either the key or like empty, so that like if it is not present on that index, it should not break. So and then I'll call the get data, the function what we created to get anything, and then in the callback we'll receive a URL. What we'll do with the URL is we will try to open that URL in the separate window so that it will download, and then it will be closed automatically. So that's what we'll do. And let's try to refresh our page and see whether it is working. So data is loaded, let's click it, and yes, it has downloaded the file. So that's the file. Let's add a couple of more files using the previous example from the last tutorial we created. So I'll add 2 more images, and then I'll refresh the page and we'll see like whether we are like able to get all of those and then download the data. Okay, so we are, all of these are like uploaded in the S3. Let's download this. So this new solar system.jpg file is downloaded. Just see like whether it's the same file or not, and yes, it's the same file. So this is how we can list all the data from an S3 bucket, and then we can download particular files from an S3 bucket. So let me know if you like this video so that I can create more videos like this. And an important notice from the AWS. So if we see at the top, AWS loves gravity in time. AWS recommends to hit like and subscribe. Just kidding, it's not from AWS. It's if you like, just like this video if you like my content. Thanks for watching, and I will come up with some great content next time. Thanks for